Hey everybody, Michael here, and welcome back to the fourth edition of the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 firmware guidance, where this guide walks you through all of the various firmwares for the PlayStation 4 and for the PlayStation 5 and gives you a bit of guidance on what you would need to do in order to get jailbroken. Okay, let's go ahead and get started here with the PlayStation 4. And after I go through each of the firmwares, we'll take a look at the current jailbreak landscape just to make sure it drives home the information that I am sharing. So, for those of you that have a PlayStation 4 on 1.x all the way up to 4.x, I would keep those systems exactly as they are. Now, there is some value from collectors that are looking for PlayStation 4s, especially on a 1.x or a 2.x. But I believe anything in this range right here is going to have more value than pretty much any of the other firmware versions for a PlayStation 4. Obviously, with any of these versions, you could just update to any version that you would like to that has whichever stable exploit that you want to take a look at. Now, for the next version here, it is for 5.00 systems. And for those, it's pretty clear. Just go ahead and update to 5.05. Now, at 5.05, this is what I believe a lot of other folks would agree is the golden firmware for the PlayStation 4. And if you are on this version, consider yourself very lucky because there isn't a lot of folks that have these, especially nowadays. Now, if you are on 5.5x, so maybe 5.50, you could go ahead and update to 6.72. Now, by going to 6.72, you are also going to a very stable jailbreak that is probably number 2 underneath the 5.05. I would pretty much consider 5.05 to be the most stable, 6.72 probably the second stable, and then 9.00 as the third. But going back over to 6.72, you again would be able to jailbreak with WebKit. You wouldn't need to buy any of the fancy Lua disk, etc. So stay where you are at if you are on 6.72. Now, for those of you that's on this 7.x and 8.x, while I know you can use PS4 hen, I would just really say at this point, there's no real reason to do that when you could just simply update those machines to 9.00, and then you could pretty much have your exploit of choice here. So if you are on 9.00, again, stay where you are at. You can use a number of different things. The exFAT hacks, which uses the USB PP PON, which uses the Ethernet port, Laps, which does require the expensive disk, or PS3, which is, again, just a WebKit exploit and doesn't require you to buy anything whatsoever. You can just simply run it from your web browser, and that is very nice. Now, one other benefit with 9.00 is that backport games for the PlayStation 4 are usually tested very heavily on the 9.00. Now, if you are on anything between that 9.0x and 9.60, I would say just going ahead and update to 9.60. And the reason for that being is that with at least 9.60, you would be able to utilize WebKit and then take advantage of something called PS3. Now, if you are on a firmware that is in the 10.x's, I would say just go ahead and update your system to 11.0. Now, 11.0 is a firmware that I also agree that you should stay with because you could utilize PP-PON, which does require the Ethernet port. Now, if you are on 11.02, for example, I would just go ahead and update to 12.0 because there at least you can take advantage of gold in. And then again, 12.00 and 12.02 here are some of the latest two versions that you can jailbreak. So 12.02 being the absolute max jailbreak version possible at this time. Now, if you are on a 12.50 or even that 12.52, which just came out yesterday, I would say just go ahead and sell them, mainly because it's pretty easy now to find a used PlayStation 4 underneath one of these firmware versions. I know I have bought and resold PlayStation 4s, and I can just tell you, for the most part, it's pretty easy to find an exploitable PlayStation 4 here in 2025. Okay, so let's just go ahead and recap the current jailbreak landscape for the PlayStation 4. So for 12.02, this is the latest PlayStation 4 jailbreak, and it does require one of the expensive Lua games because it works with labs. Now, if you do have an 11.02 all the way through 12.02, you'll also need one of the Lua discs in order to run the jailbreak. Now, those of you that is on 9.x to 11.x, and really this can be even lower firmwares than this, you do have the option to use PP there. And then anything under 9.60 and under, there is some form of WebKit that you will be able to use in order to get those systems jailbroken. Okay, let's go ahead and switch over to the PlayStation 5 now. We will go ahead and begin with versions 1.x to 2.x, and I would say absolutely to keep those systems exactly as they are. There is a lot of different collectors that is looking for these super early PlayStation 5s, and a 1.x and a 2.x is very, very rare. Now, also with that, you do get access to the hypervisor exploit that is available, but just so you are aware, if you do have a 1.x or a 2.x system, you will not be able to play pretty much any game because most of the games require a higher PS5 SDK version. Now, if you do have a 3.x system, I would recommend that you stay exactly where you are at. Now, there are a couple of different exploits available, but pretty much everyone has found the UMTX2 WebKit as one of the most stable ways to jailbreak a PlayStation 5. Now, if you have a system on 4.x, I would also recommend that you just stay exactly where you are at. 4.03 is considered the golden firmware of the PlayStation 5 era, and that's mainly because there is a number of developers and testers and just folks that's been hammering away on 4.03 for a couple of years now. You can still use the WebKit in UMTX2 and be jailbroken within a matter of seconds just using the web browser. Now, if you do have a 5.x system, I would also say stay exactly where you are at least up to 5.50. So at 5.50, the WebKit support ends there, meaning that you will need to either make a BDJB disk or buy one of the expensive Lua games. Now, if you are on a 6.x system, in my opinion, I would just go ahead and update that system to 7.61. Now, you will need a Blu-ray burner in order to take advantage of, say, Victorious's BDJB all-in-one hen disc. But yeah, I definitely would recommend updating to 7.61 if you are on a 6.x firmware. And even if you are on some of the lower versions of 7, I would just go ahead and go up to 7.61. Now, I absolutely would not want to go past 7.61, as you will find that with the 8s, 9s, 10s, and 11s, you are going to need a Lua game disk in order to jailbreak your system. Now, let me note here that a jailbreak on 8, 9, 10, or 11X does not mean that you can run things like ETA Hen. I believe for some of the very early versions of the 8, there is debug settings that is available, but you aren't going to be running any game backups on an 8.x, a 9.x, or a 10.x, or 11.x system. But it does seem like these firmware versions right here might be exploitable in the future, so stay where you are at if you're on one of these. Now, if you are on an 11.x or even an 11.40, which is the very latest PS5 firmware available, I would probably just go ahead and sell those systems if I were looking for a jailbroken PlayStation 5, and then take that money and go to a number of different pawn shops, request to see the PlayStation 5, and you might be very lucky to find something in the 8s, 7s, or 6s, but that is, of course, dependent on your market location. Okay, so let's go over the current jailbreak landscape. So if you do have an 8.0 all the way to 11.40, you can use the Lapse plus Lua exploit, but you will need to purchase one of the Lua games. Now, I will also state that it is very limited in features here. So if you're on one of these firmware versions, you are not going to be playing PlayStation 5 backup games. Now, anything under 7.61, you will be able to do that. So on 7.61, this is currently the latest PlayStation 5 jailbreak. And by jailbreak, I mean running ETA Hen along with running backups. Now, if you are on a 3.x all the way up to 5.50, you can use a WebKit exploit and maybe something such as UMTX2 and just do it all throughout the browser. And then if you are on a 2.x and under, you do have the ability to take advantage of the hypervisor. But again, you're really not going to be playing very many games with a 2.x and under. Okay, and so that is going to do it for this one. Thank you so very much for watching. Don't forget to like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Also, I would greatly appreciate you sharing this on Facebook, Reddit, etc. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you on the next one. Michael, out.